I read 8 books in the month of September. I talked about 6 of them. This is the second time I'm recording this because my SD card fucked up or something. So you're probably not going to get a lot of the description I just talked about the first time going around. So I'll do the best I can. Hello everyone, my name is October. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, welcome. If not, welcome back. This is Nerdboy Reads channel in which I talk about all the stuff that I have read, regardless of how much I enjoyed them or not. Now, this video is coming out late. I acknowledge that. You probably don't think I have a plan, but I did. I was going to record this on Saturday. But then what happened is Friday, I started having, and probably still currently am having, a mental and emotional breakdown. Meaning I didn't want to do anything. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, I didn't do anything. Didn't help that there were clouds in the sky and didn't give me the lighting that I wanted, but who cares? It is now Wednesday. This is when I planned on releasing the video. And I'm recording it. But at least it's getting recorded, right? So, I read 8 books in the month of September. I didn't set a firm TBR. I didn't set any TBR because, like I said in my August wrap-up, August kicked me in the balls. So I just let myself read things. And it worked because I unlocked the ability to read more than one book at a time. Yes, I know that a lot of other people have that ability and they do it all the time. But me personally, I was of the mindset that I had to start and finish a book one at a time before I can start another book. But no, now I unlock the ability to read 3 books at one time. I didn't know I could do that. So, that being said, that was a great help for me reading more than 5 books like I did last month, well, August. So, I'm gonna go ahead and pick up books at random. Well, not at random. I'm gonna start where I left off in my first recording of this video and talk about the Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. This is about a woman who, in the beginning of the 2020 panorama, she loses her job and takes up this super sketchy, super secretive job that she later finds out has to do with preserving kaiju. Like actual kaiju, the beasts from Japanese popular culture. And this book kind of let me down. We get a lot of description about the fictional science that Mr. Scalzi came up with, trying to figure out how kaiju would exist, and ultimately it boiled down to kaiju don't live in our dimension, they don't have to follow our science. And we get a lot of description of the facilities, we get a lot of repeating descriptions about the people that we encounter, but despite being the titular issue of this book, we don't get a lot of description about the kaiju beyond they're big, they look like landscape, some of them can fly. Am I wrong to want more description about the kaiju that we encounter when the book is literally called the Kaiju Preservation Society? I feel like John Scalzi was literally just so caught up in figuring out how kaiju would exist in the real world that he forgot to actually just think of what the kaiju looked like. Another thing that I took issue with is that a lot of the characters were flat. They didn't really have a lot of personality. A lot of them were just kind of there in the background to just be sounding boards and info dumpers for the information that we as readers find out about kaiju. And the ending was very disappointing. It felt like a very generic ending, like rich people bad and whatnot. Also, the plot didn't kick in until about 3/4 of the way through this book. Again, it was mostly an info dump about how John Scalzi feels like kaiju would work. And while it was fun to read, I had a fun time reading it. It didn't take me long to get through this book, but once I started picking up on the fact that there's no plot, the characters aren't really getting developed, there's not a lot of description about things that should be described, it started bothering me. And it just turned out to be alright after that. Like I said, the ending was very disappointing. The characters were piddling. Even the main character who we're following, she doesn't really get a lot of description. There's not a lot of fun to be had in any of the characters that she encounters. I don't really care about anything and any people that happen in this book. But other than that, it was pretty enjoyable. It was fun. If you're just looking for a nice little romp book, something that's quick and easy to digest, just pick it up. If you just want to shut your brain off and read about monster science, and pick up this book. But if you're looking for actual substance and like character development and descriptions and actual happenings and a plot, don't read this book. Like, it was a solid book. I don't normally give out star ratings on this channel. I'm not one to actually rate my books on a scale, but this wasn't very high on my reading scale. It was just kind of something that I picked up because I thought it would be fun. I've had my fun. I'm not sure how long this will stay on my shelf, honestly. I don't see myself rereading it now that I know all the stuff that I do about this book. The plot twist is very predictable. It's very easy to pick up on who the villain is going to be, and it's very easy to pick up on who's going to die. It's just something to have if you want to shut off your brain for a day or so and just read, I guess. Also, the mentions of the panorama in here are, again, piddling at best, because in 2020, our world shut down. Like, we had to stop everything, but it feels like just a minor inconvenience in this book. Like, yeah, no, I can't even say, oh yeah, and like bring up something magical that happens. No, this feels just like a minor inconvenience other than the really massive societal shutdown that it was. So that's another thing that kind of bothered me while reading this book. Like, if you read this book, you won't even really think that there's a world-ending crisis that's happening in it. It bothers me. So I think I just convinced myself to unhaul this. Since I disappointed myself with that last book, we're going to pick up on a book that I read early in the month that I actually really enjoyed, and that is The Stranger by Albert Camus. In my first talking about this book, I said all this wonderful, insightful stuff about the main character and how he goes from, and how he's a really interesting character, and how watching him interact with this world is delightful and kind of horrifying. And I just said that, so I'm gonna leave it at that. This is about the main character, Marisol. I think that's his name. I'm gonna call him that. Again, he's French. I don't know. And in the beginning of the book, we find out that his mother dies, and he behaves very oddly about it. Like, he acts like he just has to go pick up the paper instead of just making decisions about what happens to his mother, whom raised him. And it's just odd. Watching this man who doesn't really feel anything about the world around him is fascinating. This man proposes to this woman because she asked him to. Like, he just said, okay, we can get married. He just kind of muddles through life in a way. Like, he does things because he thinks they're logical and they're the things that normal humans would do in a situation, but he does them slightly to the left. Like, nothing he does feels like actual human behavior. He feels like some sort of AI who studied human behavior and tries to imitate it, but it never really works for him. And that's how he ends up in the situation that he does in the first place, because he feels like he should. It's the logical thing to do. And then he ends up getting arrested. And he's just like, oh, I don't really care. He treats this trial, this murder trial that literally could send him on death row, as if it's just something that'll just blow over. I don't know how to talk about this book. I really don't. It's absurd. It feels like satire. This man lives in my head rent-free. Like, this main character now rots in my brain. Like, and I don't know if it's the way Albert Camus wrote him or if it's the translation, but he speaks so short, concise, and disconnected. Like, he's watching someone and he's talking to a character that happens on a television. Like, he's just reacting to things like he would something on a television show, as if it doesn't affect his actual life in any capacity. And it's just so interesting to read about. Like, this man, it's a really short book. I managed to blow through this in like 2 sittings because I was reading 3 books at the time and this was one of them. So I had to divide my time, but I couldn't put this down. Watching him just lie to the police, bury his mom without a blink, and immediately go to a beach party and have sex immediately after burying his mom? What is this? He hears this man abuse his dog several times, and he's just like, they love each other. That's fine. He should just get rid of the dog. Like, and then the dog leaves later, and he's just like, oh yeah, I haven't seen it. Sucks. And then he just moves on. This man doesn't let anything affect him. And I don't know if it's just, we're not really given a lot of insight into his background, and I think that's what Albert Camus wants. Like, we don't know why he ended up the way he did, and it bothers me, but in a good way. Like, I want to go back, I want to reread this book, I want to dissect it more to figure out if I could put together why this guy acts like he does. Does that make sense? Like, it also makes me want to go back and reread Albert Camus' other works. In the back of the edition that I have, it gives us a list of, like, the works that he's written. And I mentioned this before, but I read The Plague by him in one of my classes in college, because once the panorama started happening, all the classes just kind of shifted to focus on, like, panoramas in the past and whatnot, and plagues and whatnot, and diseases and stuff. But so I read another one of his works, but I want to read more. Like, reading what this guy wrote and having it spark my brain again is just, I'm on fire. It also didn't help that this kind of felt like the first time I was reading it, because I realize now that in my first reading of this book, when I was in like 5th grade on a PDF viewer, I didn't get very far at all. I got like 15 pages into this book and realized that I can't remember anything else that happened beyond a certain point. And it was great. I loved going into it that way. And now that I know what I know about this book, I want to reread it again. Watching Marisol, who is like this character who seems so put together and disconnected, finally break in the end and realize that nothing matters. No one is above anything else. What is one thing above another? Have genuine emotions and genuine reactions, like screaming, crying, actually letting the world affect him. That's wonderful. It was a heartbreaking scene. It was harrowing. It was kind of horrifying, because reading it happened in like the last 2 pages of this book. So you're reading like 120-ish pages of this guy going around being like, okay, fine, this might as well happen, to screeching at the top of his lungs at this pastor who just tries to help him, is fascinating. Like, what is it about that moment that makes him break? I want to read it again. I'm not going to read it again now, obviously, but it was good. It was a good read. And I'm definitely going to pick up more of Mr. Camus' works. It's just, it's in my brain now. Marisol lives in my brain rent-free, and I am afraid to let him guide my actions, but I feel like he's going to end up doing that because I am also in my breakdown era. So it's a good book for that. Switching gears to something that is a bit disappointing, we have Return of the Wizard King by Chad Corey. This is a book that a series, actually, a trilogy, that I put entirely on my 5-star prediction ratings, and it didn't live up to it. This felt like a very clumsy D&D campaign in which the author tried to put a bunch of characters together that would literally never interact a day in their life, and figured the best way to do that was destiny. And I didn't like that about this book. It relied heavily on the destiny trope. It relied a lot on plot happenings, plot conveniences. It is a very plot-heavy story, which I don't really like. I like watching my characters make choices to get them from one place to the next. And that's not what happened here. I heard this one person talk about how people should write books, and it feels like if you have to write a book that says, and then this happened, and then this happened, it's a plot heavy story that shouldn't be written, and you should go back and you have to figure out what is going on, what's wrong. And that's what this book felt like. It felt like one thing happened and then this happened, and one thing happened and then this happened, and it didn't feel like the characters had really any say in what went on in this story. It felt like all the characters fell flat. Like, none of them were, there are about 5-6 characters that we follow in this book, and none of them got the development they deserved. And even the characters that we see the most of, they don't get developed well at all. Like, it feels like they just kind of went from one place, and then because they felt like they owed someone something, then they just kind of went along with everything. It didn't feel like they had really any agency. It didn't feel like they made any choices on their own. It didn't feel like they were developed at all. It just felt like they were the same characters that they were at the end, even though it was supposed to be this like journey to save the world, essentially. And it just didn't happen like that. This book was disappointing for that reason. Again, there also wasn't really any mention of a wizard king. Like, it said that there, like, it may have been like tossed around a couple times near the middle and end of this book, but there was no real happenings. Like, the big bad guy was very generic. The characters were also flat, and the ending of this book made the entire book feel like it was just supposed to be filler to get you to read the next 2 books in the series. Like, that's what it felt like. It felt like an epilogue. And prologue. And don't get me wrong, I love me a good prologue. Vinland Saga has a massive prologue. The first 4 or 5 volumes, the thick big boys, are the prologue of Vinland Saga. Dr. Stone has like a 10-ish, maybe, prologue. I love a long prologue as long as it gives you something to look forward to in the future, and it develops the characters in a way that makes the rest of the story make sense. But that's not what happened here. This just felt like bait to make you read the next book, and even then it wasn't done really well. So while I am still gonna pick up the next books in the series, I have them, I own them, I'm gonna read them, it didn't make me excited to read them. It just feels like something that I have to do to get them off my TBR, instead of this like thrilling high fantasy world adventuring story that I was looking for. So it's definitely not a 5-star read, but it was kind of fun if I think about it in the right way. I know I'm not really going into descriptions about what happened in this book, because I cannot remember a lot of what did happen, because it felt, again, like just a lot of filler to say Destiny got these characters together and then move on to the next thing that was supposed to happen on the whiteboard of things that were supposed to happen. So, yeah. And then another book that actually did that I was really looking forward to reading was Blood and Paper by Kevin Hearn. This is the second book in the Ink and Sigil duology that is a spin-off of the Iron Druid saga by Kevin Hearn. And this book disappointed me on more levels than I can anticipate. On one hand, I loved seeing the actual Iron Druid in this book. It made me want to read the Iron Druid Chronicles. He's funny. I love the way he interacts with the world and his dogs. I liked seeing McVarys and Buckfoy interact again. I loved reintroducing myself to these characters. I liked seeing Australia. I liked seeing the magic systems in the other world and getting to know the other sigil makers that inhabit this world and seeing them interact with their apprentices and all that good stuff. The really good world building. What I didn't like was how the last book, the Ink and Sigil series, the Ink and Sigil book, hinted at the end that this book was supposed to be about figuring out who put the curse on McVarys, why they did that, and potentially having to kill the person who put the curse on it before it like kills Buck. And then none of that happened. I'm so mad about that. Like, it kept getting sprinkled in there to make sure that the reader realized that that's still something that's happening in the background, but it's never explored. We never in this book figure out why McVerris is cursed. We never, that major plot point that's hanging over his head and literally wrecking his life is put aside so we can go on an Australian adventure. And even then, the Australian adventure is kind of disappointing because it also felt like just things that needed to happen on the whiteboard that Kevin Hearn wrote out, and it wasn't a satisfying ending to this duology. Things that happen in this book is that they all have to stop because Nadia gets this vision that if she's not there to help the plot move along, they're all gonna die. And it's not explained in any other way besides she has to be there. And it just felt like Kevin Hearn had an idea that he had to get Nadia from Ireland or wherever to Australia because she's a cool character. But he couldn't figure out how to do it organically, like in the beginning of the book. So he just had him stop midway through figuring out this thing and doing what they need to do. And they just sit around and tell stories all night, waiting for Nadia to get there. And it killed all the momentum that it was building up in this book. I should probably tell you what this book is about. This specific book is about McVerris gets information that some of these sigil makers from other countries have gone missing, and he has to team up with their apprentices and the Iron Druid to go to Australia to figure out why that's happening. It's a cool idea, right? It's a cool thing. But what happened at the end of Ink and Sigil and what happens in this book, it's disappointing. It just feels like someone went down and ticked off a bunch of stuff on a whiteboard that's supposed to happen and put them all together. There's no real development. The plot threads that were teased at the end of Ink and Sigil are once again teased at the end of this, but since this is just a duology, they're never going to get answered. The whole threat of why McVerris is cursed, why his apprentices are cursed to die, why he is cursed to make everyone who he speaks to for more than 5 minutes hate him, is never answered, despite it being a major player in both of these books. This is the third time I'm trying to record this segment. I took a break because I watched Mob Psycho 100 with my brother. My SD card wiped itself. Again, I talked about 3 books in that time. I'm going to finish talking about this one. I don't really have much more to say about it. It felt like the big plot points that were put in there and hinted at all throughout the end of the series, throughout the duology, and aren't answered whatsoever, and that's what really disappointed me. I'm still probably going to read the Iron Druid Chronicles if I can find the covers that don't make me want to vomit, because I hate the covers for the original ones that they have out now. But yeah, not much to say about this. And then a book that I really liked, we have Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph White. This is the third time I'm going to try to talk about this, so I'm going to be very brief. There's a lot of religious trauma in this book. This is about Benji, who escapes from a cult that actually succeeded in ending the world by releasing this virus that turned everyone into like these creatures, and he is infected with this alpha version of the disease, and he is meant to transform into this thing called Seraph to rule over everything and wipe out the world in the name of God. He meets up with his local LGBTQ group, the leader of whom is Nick, and he shelters Benji in exchange for using his powers to benefit the group and keep everyone alive. This is a really good book, despite me not sounding the most enthused about it. I got off of work. I'm tired. This is the third time I'm trying to review this book. I don't really give star ratings, but it's really high star rating. The transformation sequences, the body horror that's in here, the religious trauma is really good. I highly recommend reading it. I'm really tired. But this is a really good book. This is like one of my favorite books that I've read this year, especially in the month of September, because I was coming off of kind of a slump, and this really picked me up. The relationships are slow, but it's not insta-love, which I really like, but it's not exactly slow burn because they do end up like kind of in a romantic relationship by the end of the book, which I don't really count as slow burn. It takes at least 2 books for it to be considered slow burn for me. The autistic representation feels really authentic. It's not like a caricature of autism. I myself am not on the autism spectrum, but I really don't have a say in what is and what isn't accurate autism representation. But this felt like the most authentic autism representation I've ever seen. As a trans guy myself, or at least on the non-binary spectrum, or not cis female spectrum, I really related to Benji's struggles trying to get accepted with his family. I really related to the use of neo-pronouns. You don't really see that a lot in fiction, not in a lot of YA fiction. This is a really good post-apocalyptic book. It's really spooky if you like spooky things for October. That's all I want to say about it. This is the third time I've talked about this book, and I still have 3 more books to get through for the third time. So I'm gonna leave it there. Really good book. Highly recommend it. Please pick it up. I think it just came out this year. So yeah, it's really good. It's a really fun book. It just came out this year. So I highly recommend picking it up, putting this book on your radar, especially for spooky season. Yeah. I have a reread. This is The Martian by Andy Weir. If you've seen the movie, you know pretty much what this is about. This is about Mark Watney, who on a mission to Mars gets trapped on Mars in a freak accident that leaves everyone believing that he is dead. Turns out he is not, and he has to figure out a way to survive. The movie is really good. It's a really good adaptation of this book, but it cuts out a lot of things simply to be cinematic. And I understand that completely. There is not a lot of growth character-wise, because Mark is a fully established character by the time this book starts, because he is a grown man. So there's not going to be a lot of development in terms of, like, personality and whatnot. It's mainly a struggle about a man trying to survive, and that's the kind of book that I like. The movie cuts out a lot of stuff, which is understandable because, again, it's very cinematic. It has to be concise. I like Andy Weir's style of sci-fi simply because it is based in a lot of reality and has a lot of science on his side, so it feels really grounded. And you can really tell that Andy Weir has done his research trying to write this book, because everything feels pliable, it feels realistic, it feels like it could actually happen, like someone could actually get trapped on Mars, and if it did, this is probably how they would survive, considering that if you're going to Mars, you're one of the smartest people on the planet and off planet. I really like the moments of, like, realization that come from Mark as he realizes that he is the only one on this planet, and while it is not actively trying to kill him, it's actively not trying to save him either, which is kind of horrifying. That's why I really don't like space. Space is very uncaring. It doesn't care whether or not you live or not, and I guess that argument can be made against Earth as well, but at least on Earth I can breathe and I can run if I need to, whereas on Mars or in space it takes like 20 minutes to get preparation to walk if I want to do anything like that. So endings are changed in the book from the movie. The humor is great. Please forgive me for being brief. I tried to record this video 3 different times and my SD card wiped itself each time, and I'm very tired. I haven't eaten yet. So I'm gonna leave it there. Really good book. I'm really glad I reread this. I forgot a lot that happened in this book, and because and it also didn't help that my main source of interacting with this media is through the movie. So I was expecting things that happened in the book, in the movie, but they didn't happen in the book because it was made specifically to happen in the movie. So, yeah, really good book. If you like the movie, pick up the book. Yeah. The penultimate book that I'm about to talk about right now is the penultimate book that I read this month. This is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is about a orc named Viv who decides to give up the life of adventuring to open a coffee shop. This is a slow-paced, character-driven, slice of life little moment that I adored. There's not much I can say about this book. It's kind of tropey, but it also subverts some tropes. It has hints of LGBT in it. It's just a nice little slow-paced book that I love to read. It has very fall-esque vibes with the descriptions of how coffee is made and how a shop gets run, especially in this world, and how they're just feeling out the business. And it's just a cozy, comfy read that made me want to curl up with a cup of chai and just vibe. I like the cast of characters that we're introduced to. They interact in a hilarious way, and it's definitely a found family trope, even in like the minor characters that become repeat customers in this place. And I love how they take the little bits of information and suggestions that they're given throughout the book, and they take it to heart and they make it work. Enjoy Viv and Tangi's relationship and watching it bloom from like strangers to business partners, and just watching them interact. I enjoy having the descriptions of just building things with your hands and making sure that they're tangible. There's not much I'm saying about this book because there's not much that happens in this book, and that's fine. Some of the things that happen are cliche, like the new person moves into town and figures out that there needs to be a payment for protection kind of thing. But other than that, this is just a nice little cozy read to just sit down and bundle up with, especially now that the weather's changing. It really is a autumnal book, and yeah, that's all I can really say about this. There's not a lot of character development. I say that a lot in this series, in this little place, but this is understandable because like they do try. There's like minor realistic character development in which they change like tiny habits of theirs to try to make themselves better for the betterment of everything that happens. Some trauma, it feels kind of unrealistic though because there's no real trauma. Like Viv has been adventuring and has probably had to do a lot of things to survive, but it doesn't really seem to haunt her as much as I think it should. It could just be because I love trauma and stuff like that, but still. It's a sweet little read. I highly recommend it if you just want to take a slow little afternoon, curl up with a coffee or a tea, and just read. So yeah, that's where I'm going to leave this. Not much to say. Definitely one of my favorites. I love these kind of books, the little character slice of life moments. If you want a coffee shop AU, read this book. Finally, I got this book in like college. This last book that I have, I got it in like my first or second year of college. It was supposed to be one of the group reads that everyone was supposed to read, and the author was going to come and we're going to talk about the book and all that stuff. I didn't do it because I didn't care. And to be honest, now that I've read this book, I still kind of don't care. I'm talking about Cersei by Madeline Miller. Don't get me wrong. I liked this book. This is about Cersei, and we literally just follow her life and how she interacts with the characters, especially the major players in a lot of Greek myths. That's what this book is. She is apparently a minor deity who appears in a few Greek myths, and this is supposed to be her life story and how she ends up where she does when the people come to interact with her for their legends. And that's about all it really is. I enjoy a good character study, and that's really how I read it as. I'm not like a big, huge stan of Greek mythology. I don't know a lot of legends and stuff off the top of my head besides Prometheus, who gets his liver mutilated so I can commit arson, and that's fine. If you like a good just character study to watch a character from birth till like not death, but like as close to death as an immortal can, like where their life is going to end up, read this book. It's good just for that. That's how I'm going to review it, because I don't know a lot of Greek myths. I feel like if I did know a lot more Greek mythology, I would enjoy this book a whole lot more. But since I don't, I have to read it as I do, and it's just a character study, and it's good. It's really solid. It's a good character study. I enjoy seeing her transformation from this like sweet little girl in the beginning who just tries her best to fit in and still gets shunned. It feels like an everyone shits on Cersei show for a little bit there. But watching her go from that to the witch that she is in the end is great. Like, she takes back her power. She realizes that her life is her own. She stops trying to impress people. She stops trying to be who she's not, and she just lives, and that's good for her. This is a good little good for her girly moment, and I enjoyed it reading it like that. Her brief stint with motherhood is interesting because I'm not one who wants kids, and I've heard about all these people who, like, they meet their child after they birth them, and it's just like an instant connection, but that's not what happens with Cersei. While she does have the huge, like, motherly instincts that, like, make her want to protect everyone, will make her protect her child no matter what, there's no instant connection between her and her child, because she herself was a quiet child, and she never really interacted with other children her age because they shunned her. And now she has to raise a child on her own, isolated on this island, and she doesn't know how to do it. So seeing that was really interesting. Seeing her brief stints with romance and human interaction are fun, but I enjoy just the moments where she sits and she makes her spells and she's trying to figure out what she can and can't do with her magic. Those are the moments that I really like the most. I enjoyed seeing how the little myths play out after her little interactions with them end. I enjoy seeing the Scylla. That was a Skila. I don't know how to pronounce it. The little monster beast thing. That was really fun. How that came to be, how she cursed that girl and created this monster. I don't like the angle. I'm trying to angle it so it's not just like eyes and blackness, because that's kind of horrifying. I don't know if it's just me, but that's horrifying to me. So I'm going to hold it like that so it's not as off-putting. But yeah, I can't really say much else about this book. It's a really good character study. It's a really good retelling, I think. I don't really know the myths, but I feel like everyone who I've heard retold said this is a really good retelling. And yeah, I'm glad I finally got this off my TBR. Like, I just need to read, the Odyssey next, and I'll finally fulfill my college goals, like the goals that the college have set for me. But yeah. That was it. That was my September wrap up. I am so sorry that I kind of skimmed a bunch of these books, but like I said, I tried to record this video 3 times. It's 8 o'clock. I'm very tired. I haven't eaten. I've re-recorded this 3 times, and I'm kind of finished. It was a really good reading month for me. I enjoyed a lot of the books that I read, even though we had a couple spotty. It started off a little bit spotty with all the disappointments, but it really picked up. I'm done now. I don't really have a big final saying here. Pretty solid reading month overall. I'm gonna go eat dinner. That's all I really want to do. I'm very tired. I've been tired all day. Sorry this is so late. Like I said, I have been on a emotional downswing, which is why this is so late. Yeah, that's about it. That's been the wrap up. This has been Nerd Boy Reads. I've been October. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!